Is Nigeria on the verge of victory or more violence? Rights groups say the government's strategy to defeat Boko Haram is only making the terror group stronger. I'm Imran Garta, and today's Newsmaker is Nigeria's counter-terror struggle. It was meant to spell the end for Boko Haram. A force made up of fighters from 5 African nations was tasked with defeating the terror group. Their commander now says that objective is all but complete. But just like Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari's victory announcement 10 months ago, the problem is that Boko Haram seems just as deadly as ever. Sure, towns are being cleared and the number of suicide bombings are on the decline. Yet the group continues to coerce women and children into blowing themselves up. In fact, twice as many people have been killed in the past 5 months than in the previous 5. What if the government's counter-terror methods are actually prolonging the conflict? Vanessa Keneally has this report.
In a Nigerian village at the epicenter of Boko Haram's reign, residents absorb the news that yet another 12 people have been killed.
They drop the suicide bomber. They start shooting gun. So our people they enter inside town. As they enter inside town, so people they start running.
The latest attack on civilians, despite Nigeria's government saying it has things under control. But UNICEF says the number of child suicide bombers reached 83 this year, more than 4 times the figure in 2016. Nigeria is part of a multinational joint task force against Boko Haram, set up in 2014 with Niger, Cameroon and Chad. Over the past 7 years, the militants have targeted all of these nations. They have killed more than 20,000 people, displaced 1.7 million, and left another 10 million people in need of food and shelter. Human rights groups say the Nigerian government's tactics against the group, including executions, arrests and enforced disappearances, could be harming innocent civilians and exacerbating the violence.
Amnesty International believes that the main causes of death in detention were starvation, thirst, suffocation, severe overcrowding that led to spread of diseases, torture, lack of medical attention and the use of fumigation chemicals in unventilated cells.
The report is not the first time Nigeria has been accused of going too far with its anti-terror strategy. Former US President Barack Obama had signed off a $6 million aircraft and weapons deal with Abuja. But the agreement was delayed after concerns over alleged abuse by African forces. The US now says it will go forward. The war against Boko Haram has cost nearly $9 billion across northeastern Nigeria alone, in a nation riddled with political instability and a weak economy. And Nigeria's neighbours are in no position to help. Thousands of people face drought and famine in the desert of Niger, while in Chad and Cameroon, Boko Haram's shift in tactics in recent months has made civilians even more vulnerable than ever. Vanessa Keneally, The Newsmakers.
Well, to debate the best way of battling Boko Haram, I'm joined now from London by Tunde Doherty. He's the Deputy Chairman of the UK chapter of Nigeria's ruling party, the All Progressives Congress, the APC. And in Lagos, we have Tanwa Ashiru. She's the founder of Bulwark Intelligence, a privately owned security consulting firm. She has also advised NATO on how to deal with the Boko Haram insurgency. I thank you both for joining us. Tanwa, if I can begin with you. We had news on Tuesday from the Nigerian army saying they killed 18 Boko Haram fighters in Sambisa forest after a battle. When you hear news like that from the Nigerian army, do you believe them?
Well, I mean, it gets challenging to believe them because we're hoping to see the results on the ground, which is with reduced IED attacks or reduced presence or reduced activity of Boko Haram. Unfortunately, it is not translating. In fact, what we're seeing is a case whereby the locals still seem to be supporting Boko Haram for one reason or the other. Recently, in fact, one of the Chibok girls who was free, or she was a person, one of the females who was released from Boko Haram captivity, we actually found out that she ran back to Boko Haram territory, saying that, you know, her husband treated her better. And we've seen so many cases like that. So really it boils down to the community. How does the community feel about the military's operations? Bottom line, it shows that the military has not been able to effectively win over the locals, and that's why Boko Haram still seems to be going pretty strong.
Tunde Doherty, when people are suspicious of the news that comes from the army and people are suspicious of where this battle is at, with all of that in mind, 10 months on, did President Buhari make a mistake in declaring victory? Because it's clear you haven't beaten anybody. The fight's still raging.
I would not agree with you on the fact that the president is not made a highway in combating Boko Haram.
But he didn't say we made a highway. He said we won. Yes,
I will tell you that the president has articulated the fact that the Boko Haram battle is won. Because if you look back to the insurgent years back, you see that what we have now is just a miscreant of attack here and there. And the fact that every operational base of Boko Haram, including the Sambisa forest, has been thoroughly cordoned and dealt with, it has virtually destabilized the organizing mechanism to go into town, take people hostage, and drive off as they used to do, go into town, go to market, take all the food stuff and all of that. Right. So what we see now is just suicide bombing.
Yeah, but unfortunately they still do that.
They cannot.
Okay, Tunde, 83 kids used as human bombs in the past year themselves, because they're kids, they're victims and they're perpetrators. 83 children, child suicide bombers, still killing scores of Nigerians over the year. While it may be fine to say, yes, we've weakened Boko Haram, that's not what the president said. He said we won. And since then, all of this is happening. So perhaps maybe there's an opportunity for a mea culpa, saying, yes, while they are weakened in some ways, in Sambisa Forest and elsewhere, clearly we maybe underestimated them.
I support the word of the president. The word of the president. The president said exactly the right thing. Exactly the right thing about the efforts of the military.
Yeah, but then the president is not actually the one who is getting attacked on the ground. The people on the ground are still getting attacked. He just mentioned all those numbers of children who are still being used as suicide bombers. Actually, the thing is, the military, all they really did was that they allowed Boko Haram change their tactics. And so you can't say that because a terrorist group has changed their tactics, it means that we've defeated them, simply because whatever activity you did prevented them from continuing the way they were, which is holding down territory. So now they don't hold territory, in fact, at least not in the populated areas, because they still have a lot of territory. Recently, the Nigerian Air Force actually said that on the border of Borno and Lake Chad area, they actually found flags of Boko Haram flags that were flying in the area, and they conducted an airstrike on the area. So what does that mean? It means that, yes, you may have been successful in pushing them out of Sambisa,
that is to tell,
but you pushed them out into other areas. That is to tell you that the Nigerian army, the Nigerian Air Force, and the Nigerian military are 24 hours on this fight, even though the battle has been won. But the presence of the army and
Tunde, did we expect them not to be 24/7 on this fight?
You see, you cannot just say because you have destabilized a structure and believe that everything is over. It's never over. Even today in Iran, in Afghanistan, the presence of the U.S. military and British military officers are still there. Every day things happened. So we don't expect that overwhelming miracle that, oh yes, because it's been declared.
I think you mean Iraq, not Iran.
Yes,
nevertheless, let me ask Tanwa.
I want to ask Tanwa. That's why nobody really comes out to say.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes.
Yeah, let's just kind of move on from this for a moment. And let me ask you, Tanwa, the fact that Boko Haram has splintered effectively into two groups, because you have Shekau. I mean, we'd heard he died multiple times. He's still alive, according to all the best available evidence. And you have Barnawi as well. Now, I guess there's two ways to look at it. Does them splintering mean that they're weakened, or are they double the trouble now? Which one is it?
Yeah, it's actually, it's double the trouble. In fact, one of the recent attacks that took place when some lecturers from the university were carrying out some surveillance or some surveys, some ground surveys for oil exploration or whatever it was they were doing out there, they were actually attacked by the al-Barnawi faction. And so really what this shows you is, look, we're actually fighting on two ends. Al-Barnawi does not agree with Shekau, but I think that has to do more with, there's a lot of ego involved. He claims it's because Shekau is not actually following a lot of the rules and the tenets of what he's supposed to be doing, but it has more to do with ego. Shekau has always been there. The military keeps saying that they found him. They have not found him. Every time, in fact, recently the army said, look, we give you 40 days, a 40-day ultimatum, you need to find him. And then every time they do that, he bounces back, releases a new video, tells them, look, I'm still very much around. And that right there just signifies really that when it comes to intelligence, there's still a huge problem.
Tunde,
so
how
you
do you
can't
feel?
say that an organization has been defeated, a terrorist organization has been defeated when they're still carrying out attacks.
Certainly. Tunde, let me ask you then, how do you feel about the fact that Shekau has been pronounced dead multiple times, only for him to emerge in new videos? A Boko Haram commander recently, Shuaib Monu, came out and he mocked the Nigerian army and the government over their failure to capture Shekau, given their 40-day deadline. Moni even described President Buhari as a small ant. So they come out with these videos and they mock the president and they say, hey, I'm alive. You said I was dead. How do you feel about that? Doesn't that seem as if what the pronouncements we're getting from the Nigerian government and the Nigerian army don't really match with what's going on the ground?
The point is the strategies of the military cannot be divulged into the public. The military and the surveillance and the intelligence are at work 24/7. Shekau is just being cowardly. The thing is that Shekau has died several times. He has rejoiced in videos that definitely you might not. You just see the masquerade. Definitely you don't even know whether it's the real Shekau or whatever. The thing is that because they have an organization that cannot be as coordinated as it used to be before. Mark you, even the government, even in the fight of Boko Haram, the government is trying as much as possible to even negotiate. With these people if they show up. It's not a matter of taking them to war and all of this. You have a fight with the federal government. The government is ready to say, okay, come, let's sit down on the table. Let's discuss this problem. Let it go all over. Let us all live in peace. Stop all of this.
But I think, Tunde, where you misunderstand.
Over 20,000 people.
Certainly.
And continue to kill.
Yeah, okay. Tunde, where I think you misunderstand is any criticism,
on a table
you're
and
assuming...
talk to people who are doing that.
Yeah, Tunde, you're assuming we're saying the government's not working hard to fight Boko Haram. That's not the question. It is working 24/7. It's trying hard to fight Boko Haram. We're asking if it's doing it in the right way or if it's making mistakes along the way. And as a part of that, Tunde, let me add to that. I read a report from the International Crisis Group about vigilantes, right? Originally emerging in Maiduguri and now spreading because you have a vacuum, because people on the ground feel that the army and Nigerian security services are not doing enough to defeat Boko Haram, so they're taking up arms themselves, and in the process, some of them are terrorizing their own villages and committing human rights abuses and so on, because they're vigilantes, Nigerians taking up arms by themselves because they don't trust their army. Surely that tells you there's a problem, Tunde.
That's not a problem at all. That's in fighting a Boko Haram, you need all the support that is necessary, because you see these people, the constituents of Boko Haram are people that lives among themselves, who knows each other. So if you are fighting such a war, which is like a guerrilla war as it is you have to engage those communities where these people come from. The people knows who they can identify who is the terrorist from among the other citizens. So for the Nigerian government to encourage and bring together the community vigilantes to assist in the fight of Boko Haram, I think is the right thing to do. Is the right strategy to apply in order that we will be able to identify. You see, we are talking about what is happening. We are not talking about the day-to-day opportunity the government has been given for things not to have happened. You see, out of, let's say, out of 100 of attacks, just about, let's say, about 10 or 20 happens, and people say, hey, but they're not looking inward of the effort of the government within the last 2 years.
Again,
look at we must take stock of the fact that the federal government
certainly but it's not about the effort. They're working hard. They're doing all they can. Tanwa, because we're running out of time, tell me how this can end well. Tell me how you feel an adjustment can be made to ensure that the fight against Boko Haram can be won and all the suffering of all these civilians can come to an end. Tell me, Tanwa.
I can tell you.
Tanwa, please.
Well, I mean, there's one aspect in which I agree with Tunde, which is that they're actually supposed to be working with the locals. The vigilantes actually work alongside with the military. But then what really needs to happen, and this is a problem that we're seeing pan-Nigeria, is we're seeing more and more military doing or performing the work that the police force should be doing. And so there's a lot of militarization. And for a country that's had, a pretty shaky history with the military, there needs to be a shift from that. And so instead, what we're seeing is vigilantes who are doing the work of what the police should be doing. So for this to end well, the truth is it has to come from the locals. Look, part of the reason why Boko Haram is still going strong right now today is because of the money. It really is. It's a matter of follow the money, follow the finances. Who is benefiting from this? Because there are a lot of people benefiting from it, and that's what's keeping the war going on. All the way from all the extra money that's being pumped into the area to people who are supplying, weapons and everything else that's going on. So you have to follow that. That's number one. Number two, the locals. The locals really, really need to step up. In fact, there was a recent report that came out that said that some local parents were actually selling selling their children, their girls, their daughters to Boko Haram to be used as suicide bombers. So obviously that aspect also highlights the socioeconomic issues that are going on in the area. But then it also shows that, residents of the state, Borno, the locals there in Maiduguri, everybody needs to be all hands on deck on this. And the police needs to play a more vital role in this. They need to step up. The military cannot be there forever. They need to be able to go in, do what they need to do, and then hand over to the police to really hold down and maintain whatever progress that they've made.
Tunde
So that's one of
Doherty
the
and
best ways that
Tanwa
they can go
Ashiru,
forward with this.
I think it's been a fantastic conversation. Unfortunately, I'm out of time, but I appreciate both of you coming on the program. I hope to have you both on the program again. I thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Still ahead, Germany's far right says it's a battle of bikinis over burqas as refugees become political fodder ahead of Sunday's election. Will Merkel's open borders backfire? And we look at South Korea's decapitation brigade, training to assassinate North Korea's ruler. Welcome back to the Newsmakers. Germans head to the polls on Sunday in what's being seen as a test of the country's compassion. For many voters, this election is really only about one issue: refugees. Whether it's concerns about security or the economy, it all seems to come back to the more than 1 million asylum seekers Germany welcomed in 2 years ago. And Merkel's open-door policy may have paved the way for her political rivals to score big at the ballot box. A far-right party could likely enter parliament for the first time since World War II. How will this impact Germany's political dynamics? And how are refugees coping? Yvette McCullough went to Berlin to find out.
Germans are about to choose the path they want their country to take and who they want to lead them down it, as the nation sometimes struggles to adjust to hosting more than 1 million refugees.
At its height, the refugee crisis looks like it could be Chancellor Angela Merkel's undoing. Her popularity plummeted while the far-right anti-immigration party, Alternative for Germany, soared. Immigration is still a big issue for many German voters, and all the parties are campaigning on a different solution.
Dresden is the birthplace of the patriotic Europeans against the Islamization of the West, or Pegida. Their members are accused of being racist neo-Nazis, and some have physically attacked refugees. But their views are becoming more mainstream and gaining a political voice through the AfD, which looks likely to be the first far-right party to enter the Bundestag in post-war history.
Die Probleme sind, dass viele ältere Leute hier da sind, viele sozial Schwache, für die war bislang halt kein Geld da.
Die Politiker sind für ihr Volk angetreten, nicht für andere, die in unser Land reinkommen. Man kann dann ins Haus und die Türe offen machen und rein.
Syed Nurpacha has been in Dresden for 2 years. He's a refugee from Afghanistan. Syed says while he's had some great experiences with kind, welcoming Germans here, he's also had some bad ones.
I was walking on the street and some of them came and they used very bad word to me. And I didn't say anything, and I told him, Danke schön.
Last year, one of his refugee friends was beaten in the street.
They catch him and they beat him, and he was very crying, you know, when I reached to him, and he said, "Why? What's my fault?"
It wasn't supposed to be like this when Chancellor Angela Merkel opened Germany's doors.
Refugees are welcome here. Say it now, say it here. Refugees are welcome here.
In 2015, there was a wave of support for refugees coming to Germany. But it didn't take long for that wave to crash. Franziska Hoenisch wanted to make a positive film about Germans who opened their homes to refugees. But when she started researching, she found the reality was harsher.
One woman, she said one sentence that shifted for us the whole script writing process, which was, she said, "Helping is no fun."
Her film Club Europa tells the story of what happens when a refugee living in a share house has their asylum rejected.
It used to be a bit like a fashion, like I help refugees. There was even this phrase, "I do refugee work," where, you know, you feel like, okay, what does that mean? And why do you announce it so loud?
For many Germans, the biggest issue is integration. How to adjust to living or working with someone from a different culture and language. Ahmed Mobayed came from Syria as a refugee and arrived in Germany in 2015. He's studying on a scholarship at International University, Bard College.
Day after day, I was really feeling that the only thing can be really useful for me and for the future of my family and my country is just to stick to education, because I felt that the main problem that we're having in my country is because of the lack of the right education.
He says while he has mostly been made to feel welcome in Germany, integrating into German culture and learning the language is a difficult and long process.
And some people just kind of they just ignore those differences and they stick to their fellow refugees, and they spend most of the time with them, which creates some kind of ghettos. But I think for the most people who are ambitious and really passionate about being here, either in Germany or in Europe, they will find a way.
As Germans go to the polls on September 24, will the sentiment towards refugees lead to policies that make it easier or harder for them to find their way here? Yvette McCullough in Berlin for the Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Frank Hansel. He's a member of the Alternative for Germany Party, AfD, and a member of Berlin's regional parliament. Also in the German capital, we have Thomas Klein-Brockhoff. He's the vice president of the think tank, the German Marshall Fund of the United States. And in Frankfurt, Zafer Mesche. He's the general coordinator at the German office of the SETA Foundation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Thomas, let me begin with you. Let's all assume this election, at the heart of it, is all about refugees. Has Angela Merkel pushed many Germans into the hands of the far right because over the past 2 years, she's taken in 1 million refugees and migrants?
First of all, this election is not all about refugees. It's not all about one issue. In fact, it is less about this issue than one might have thought, given the enormous number of people who have arrived. And it certainly, the consequence of it is that on the fringes of the German electorate, there is a movement that will probably gain from this, but the center in the German electorate seems to be not only holding but concerned about many issues, only one of them being refugees.
Frank, is it a good time to be the AfD?
Yes, I think, yes, and I would not say, of course, we are not right-wing. That's what the media say, and they put us into this direction, but we are actually a center-right party who understand that Mrs. Merkel has brought the Christian Democrats into the social democracy. So there was a shift from the center-right to the left, and we fill this political vacuum. We are not far-right. We just want law back into the country and rules and law.
Hold on, you say you're not far right. You said you're not even right wing, you say you're center right.
Yes.
So during this entire campaign, you've essentially had a big clear target of 1 million mainly helpless, penniless new arrivals as your target to blame for all your problems in the country. Historically, you've had Holocaust deniers associated with your party. Historically, that was an issue. You kicked them out of the party. You have an AfD candidate saying the Muslim religion does not belong in Germany, also saying Germany should be proud of its World War II veterans. That's Alexander Gauland. You mentioned all of this to me, and then, I mean, this is all in the evidence, this is in the track record, and then you tell me you're not right-wing. I mean, can you at least admit that the AfD is far-right and people might relate to those ideas?
We are not far-right, and although within the party we sometimes criticize some voices which are then scandalized by the media. What our electorate and what our people want is that we get control of who comes into the country again. Nobody wants to expel nobody. This is not the point, and we understand, and we have the asylum law. This is no problem. Civil war, refugees have to be protected in our country. This is not the problem. But if you lose the total control of the borders and you have 600,000 people coming in who are not registered, who nobody knows who they are, what they want, and how long they're going to stay, then you have a problem. And this problem is what the German electorate, I think, criticizes with the Angela Merkel government. But when we say Islam is not part of Germany, then it's the Islam, the expanding Islam, and it's not the spirituality of the people, and of course we have religious freedom. This is not the point, and we do not say the Muslims are not part of the country, because they are, especially if they are integrated and on the ground of our federal, on the constitutional law. We do not want Sharia in our country, and I think this is very legitimate to say.
Do you believe, genuinely, Frank, that there's an imminent possibility that Sharia will be implemented in Germany very soon if the German government continues to bring in refugees?
Well, of course not tomorrow and not the day after tomorrow. But if you have cities like Offenbach or in Frankfurt and other cities, where in the 6th class, in the pupils, there is 70% already with migrants and Muslim migrants, and then if you see one generation more, and we talk about 20 or 30 years, then this is not absolutely deniable. And we just want control, and everybody's welcome if they are conforming with our values and tolerance, which we have gained in the last 20, 30 years. We want people who contribute to the country, who work here. We want an immigration law, which AfD wants since we were founded in 2013. We were the first one who understood that we need migration and immigration into the country, but we want it in a selected way, like the Anglo-Saxon country do it, like Canada and the United States.
Okay.
What we do not want is uncontrolled migration.
Zafar, let me ask you, tell me if you believe those, Zafar, who who would agree with Frank and would vote for the AFD candidates. Tell me if you think they're onto something, or if they have some reasonable claims for what they're doing. Because as Frank says, they see a logic behind it and they feel they're just protecting their own.
I mean, I've heard the colleague from the AFD, and I can only say that it is not just a small minority group within the party which is, let's say, extreme right. I mean, here is a very good podium that he can distance himself from the statement of his chairman of the party, Gauland. He said that the government's integration official, top politician Aydan Özoğuz, could be disposed of in Anatolia, and he's glorifying the Wehrmacht soldiers who were serving under Adolf Hitler as patriots. So, okay, let me believe you and just distance yourself.
Okay, so let's ask Frank. Frank, World War II veterans, those were Nazis. They were not good guys. Was that a big mistake of what Gauland said? Would you condemn that?
Well, let me put it in two ways. The first one was the integration ministry. Of course, it would not be my tone, but what is true, I think, that we should not part of a German government official if she thinks that there is no German culture beyond the language. Of course, this is a political statement of her that is wrong, but the way Mr. Gauland put it is probably not really helpful, especially as we do not want to gain votes from the far right or from the neo-Nazis, which is not our electorate. We need to gain confidence by people who lost confidence with Angela Merkel and the Social Democrats, the Grand Coalition. We want the normal people from the center of the political spectrum to trust in AFD. We do not want the right one. That's the first thing. The second thing is what Gauland said of the Wehrmacht.
There is no distance from the statement of your president, of your chairman. There is no distance, I suppose.
Well, he's not president. He's deputy.
You know why? Because
he's deputy German,
AFD,
and I
AFD
said...
Okay, Zafar. Okay, Frank, answer the second point. Answer the second point, Frank.
Yeah. There is a large, for the last 10 or 15 years on the Wehrmacht, and what is clear and what was the sense behind this, that not every soldier was a Nazi. There were soldiers who defended their country and were patriots in this way. Of course, they were Nazis, but please understand also that the resistance against Hitler were also soldiers by the Wehrmacht. The problem of Gauland's statement was that it was wrong in the wrong time. We Germans want solutions for the future. We need to solve our future problems and not attitudes of the past. So this was historically from the timing,
it was not in the wrong time.
Statement.
It's just about election day, and he was about to fishing the undecided voters for his party. There is pure strategy behind it, and there's another strategy.
But I told you that our strategy is not to win the right wing. We want the center-right people who are disappointed by Mrs. Merkel.
Okay, fair enough.
And
I want to take that point and I want to pose it to Thomas. I want to take that point. Hold on, Zafar, if you please. Zafar, allow me to take that point and pose it to Thomas. So, Thomas, you have their strategy, as they say, from the horse's mouth. They're trying to pick off those who are disaffected by the middle or the center-right. They feel Merkel's let them down. They want to pick off these voters. Does Merkel still have enough from among those in the middle, whether we're saying center-right or we're saying center-left from her coalition partners, to keep Germany as it is right now? Or after this election, might there be a possibility, Thomas, that Germany will fundamentally change overnight?
I don't believe that will happen. The polls show conclusively, no matter how much a panel like this will get at each other's throat, that the center in this country is strong, the center is holding, the polls show her in front, the polls show her far in front. It is very unlikely that in whatever coalition, whatever thinkable coalition of the center, the policy of the country will change dramatically. It is important to note that given the numbers of refugees this country has hosted since 2015, the enormous contributions of people who have taken people in, of taxpayers who have paid an enormous amount to make this happen, and a labor market that is sucking up refugees even if they can't speak the language because it is so bullish. So I would actually turn the focus of this conversation about what has been achieved and how strong the center is that is going to win this election.
Zafar, if the center is going to do so well, and the polls, as Thomas mentions, I mean, it seems as if from an ARD poll that Merkel's Christian Democratic Union are 17 points ahead of the center-left, right? So if they're going to be doing so well, and at best you might just have, for example, the AfD on the right, the far right, having a little representation in parliament, why are you so worried, Zafar?
It's not a little representation. According to the recent polls, it's somehow beyond 10%. Maybe they will be the strongest third party following Christian Democrats and Social Democrats. If they have 13%, they will have 100 deputies in the German parliament, and which means that from 600 deputies, we will have 100 AfD members in the parliament. And you know what will happen? I mean, the debate, the parliamentary debate culture will change. It will be more aggressive, more tougher, and AfD will follow a pattern of a strategy, namely to let's say to breaking taboos about sensitive political topics, where all democratic parties have a consensus on let's say on the historical workup of the Third Reich, the culture of remembrance of Holocaust, with thinking in relative terms, all these issues. So you know they are in 13 state parliaments as well. Now, if they will be in the federal parliament,
let me, if you allow me, jump in on Zafar's comment, if you could.
Come in, Thomas.
Please.
Nobody,
Should I comment?
Nobody in the center of the political spectrum, to whatever center-left or center-right party, is welcoming of the fact that the AfD will likely join the parliament. And yes, it is true, there will be a number. If polls hold up, there will be a number, not even a small number of members of parliament from the AfD. But the German parliament and German democracy is strong and has a strong tradition of integrating even extreme voices. We have seen that from the 1960s onwards. We have integrated the Greens as a new party that was pretty radical in the 1980s. The post-communists and post-1989
That's exactly the issue. They are at the end of the day integrated. And the AfD will somehow also on the right spectrum, most probably. I don't know. So
okay, so let's ask the man from the AfD, what would constitute a successful election for you? Is it what Zafar fears, that you get some seats in parliament and you get to change the narrative, you get to shake things up a little bit and you get absorbed and integrated into the political culture? That's what he fears. Tell me what you think, Frank.
Well, first of all, I think we will become the third power, political power in Germany. That's true. We are already in the 13 state parliaments, as was said. That's correct. And it is good. It's actually good because we are doing something for democracy. We bring people back into the electoral, in the voting process. Because if 20 to 30 or even 40% sometimes do not vote, then this shows actually frustration of our way of democracy. So we bring back the people, or part of the people, into the electorate process, which is good for democracy. And then what is important, we need an opposition. We have the Euro rescue crisis, which the Euro divides Europe. We understand that Germany gains from the Euro, but Spain, Italy, Greece, and Portugal, they suffer from the overweighted Euro. And we have the migration crisis, and the discontent of the population is there, and we try to canalize it in a parliamentary, rational process. Imagine if we would not be there. then it could be happening what Zafar says, that there might be coming up some guys and some people on the street and try to get violent problems in the street. We do not want this. We want to canalize uncontent part of the population.
So Zafar,
we want
fight
to
them
be
in
a
Parliament.
strong
Okay, so let's get,
opposition.
certainly, good point. Zafar, fight them in Parliament. Fight their ideas with better ideas in Parliament. Don't exclude them from the political process. What do you think, Zafar?
Exactly.
I mean, the issue is really, I am for the democratic principles, of course, but then you have to play the game according to the rules. What we witness now,
doing this.
The recent days, the AFD is getting more and more aggressive in order to, as I said, to fish for more, let's say, voters who are not decided. We have another issue. We have the issue of the German identity, which is, you know, we are living in a Germany of 82 millions and we have 61 million voters, which means that we have a very big group, more than 50 years old. 50% of the voters are older than 50 years, and 18 million are older than 70 years. That we have an aging country with a young generation, with migration background. So when we step into the discussion about the German identity, I'm really wondering what AFD is thinking about how to integrate migrants. That means with the background being not a bio-German. So how do we coexist in a system together with the understanding of the Völkisch, we say in German, which bases on the blood and race. How do we coexist together?
I want to actually ask that to Thomas.
I'm sorry, but this is not our discourse. We are not talking about blood. We are not talking about race. This is not AFD discourse. This is Nazi discourse.
But when you say bikinis or burqas,
I'm very sorry.
Sure, certainly, Frank. But when you say bikinis,
not our discourse.
Certainly,
as
Frank.
I said, we want.
I'm sorry that you're not telling the truth. I'm really sorry.
You're presenting perhaps a false dichotomy to voters here. You're saying it's either the one thing or the other. Nevertheless, I'm running out of time, so let me ask Thomas.
Let me just make one point, please, gentlemen. One point only. We don't have to convince the 100% convinced already. So if there are right-wing voters probably who want to vote AFD, let them do it. But we do not gain anything by giving them fire to voters. We do not the 150%ers. We need the one who is skeptical. We need the ones who want to back control in the country. And this is the electorate
and that's fine.
of
and
the middle
you've
class
mentioned it
and
before.
the right wing. This is what we need.
That's fine,
from
and you've
the
mentioned it
center,
before.
which Merkel put into the left.
Okay.
This is our point, and this is where we're going to win
Fair
these
enough.
elections.
Thomas, we got a taste of the German culture wars, and we had a mention of German identity. Is German identity under question come this election?
German identity is formed by basic law and the principles of democracy. And the principles of democracy and that law call for pluralism, including any citizen's rights to express themselves. So we will have the AFD. The AFD will not put German democracy under siege. It will be absorbed, and I predict you it will fail.
Gentlemen, I'm out of time. I have to move on, but I've really enjoyed and appreciated talking to all of you. Frank Hansel, Thomas Klein-Brockhoff, and Zafar Meshe, thank you very much for joining us.
Now North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
The rhetoric around North Korea's nuclear threat reached new heights at the UN General Assembly this week. When it comes to containing Pyongyang, the US says the United Nations has run out of options. But South Korea still seems to have a bold plan up its sleeve. It's being called the Decapitation Unit, a group of elite soldiers forming a rapid response team with one aim: to assassinate Kim Jong-un. The South Korean defense minister announced the squad after North Korea's 6th nuclear test earlier this month. The strange thing is that it was made public at all. So is it more a strategy of deterrence than decapitation? Well, to help answer this, I'm joined now from Washington, D.C. by Jenny Town. She's the Assistant Director of the U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University. Thanks so much for joining us, Jenny. Let's park off Donald Trump for a moment and talk about him in a couple minutes' time. But let me first ask you about South Korea and this decapitation unit. Is the problem the existence of the unit itself, or the fact that South Korea's defense minister is boasting about it? What's the problem?
I think the problem is both, really. Certainly if you have such a unit or if you have such a plan, it's not something that you publicize because it's certainly bringing on more agitation than what it's worth. And these kinds of things really upset the balance as well, and are things that North Korea finds incredibly provocative and sort of the highest level of attack on the state, being that the state is so much built around the Kim dynasty. And so these kinds of things, while South Korea might think that it's to deter and sort of force North Korea to behave differently, instead it's actually almost forcing a response, a provocative response from North Korea to defend its honor.
What's the possibility of it actually being done, of a squadron actually going north, crossing the border and trying to do this?
It would be, I think it's a very low possibility, but it is something that they have also added to the U.S. joint military exercises, the U.S. ROK joint military exercise. And it's one of the things that the North Koreans have been adamant about in terms of being overly provocative beyond the scope of what the exercises normally do. And it's, again, if the U.S., South Korea were to do such a thing, I think it would be highly condemned also by the international community.
Okay, let's talk about Donald Trump. First it was fire and fury. Now he's referring to Kim Jong-un as Rocket Man, and he says he's on a suicide mission. And this comes at a time when he's saying that North Korea will be completely destroyed, completely obliterated by the United States if it brings it upon itself. What does any of that or all of that tell you about President Donald Trump's current North Korea strategy?
I think it really undermines the strategy that has been put forth by Secretary of State Tillerson in terms of not wanting war, in terms of not wanting regime change. And honestly, this isn't the way that you discuss these kinds of matters, especially in an international forum. This isn't, as president to another world leader, how you address the other leader. The whole tone, I think on some level they've calculated to try and echo the dramatic bombasticness of North Korea's rhetoric. But by adding in, this sort of denigrating statement of Rocket Man and, you're sort of begging for your own suicide, these kinds of things, again, are things that sort of force North Korea to respond because it is sort of the highest level insult, the most provocative attack on the state. And it really just sort of goads the situation. And so instead of trying to de-escalate and trying to present in a reasonable way a strong voice and a strong deterrent voice, instead it just sort of, it's more like playground antics, and it's really not helpful.
As things stand, do Moon Jae-in and Donald Trump share exactly the same view when it comes to how to deal with North Korea?
I don't believe they do. I think they've had some coordinated messages, and some of what we're seeing, especially out of South Korea, is that they were a little bit shocked by how forward-leaning Trump's remarks were. And this has been the problem between U.S.-South Korea relations, especially since the beginning of the Trump administration, is that there's been a lot of forward-leaning, a lot of hinting at military options without consultation from South Korea. And, the South Koreans know that if anything happens, North Korea is expected, will likely retaliate, and the retaliation is, the brunt of the retaliation will be felt mostly in South Korea and Japan. And so this is a huge problem, and the Moon administration, wanted to be more forward-leaning on the engagement and diplomacy side, and has sort of fallen in line with Trump's rhetoric in terms of now is not the time for negotiations. But I do not think that they agree on, the tactics that are being put forward now and how that is going to help us in the future to, again, de-escalate the situation and get negotiations back on track.
As an expert on the issue, I'm sure within the Beltway, you must have come across hawkish types who might say to you, well, sanctions don't work. North Korea has a way of evading sanctions. They've been through the worst of it in the past. They've been through famine, and that didn't cause either the collapse of the regime or for them to come in from the cold when with regards to the international community. So there's no other way to end this except for military confrontation. When you hear that sort of thing, how do you respond?
You don't hear that a lot. You hear a lot of the hawkish side also say that there's no good outcome to military options. Knowing that North Korea, has such an extensive network of nuclear, chemical, biological weapons and missiles. And we don't know where all of the assets are. We're working on imperfect information to begin with. So the idea that you could cripple the system, with some kind of military strike without any retaliation and any collateral damage is really wishful thinking. And so I think even in the conservative communities, you hear that, the strategy being put forward should really still be focused on trying to pressure North Korea. And again, you see this diplomatic pressure with other countries to pressure North Korea in order to get back to the negotiating table. And at least, to try and change their calculus of how they move forward. But there really isn't a good military option, and you've heard Secretary Mattis say this several times. And out of the region, again, while there's value to sounding tough, there is no way forward, a military way forward that doesn't end in some kind of devastation.
Jenny Town, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. And that's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Next time, we ask whether the members of the UN Security Council are responsible for global insecurity. Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.